Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks live from Warsaw. Now, apart from the new president, Americans are also choosing members of the House of Representatives. 1/3 of senators and will vote on abortion rights as well as the use of marijuana. And to talk about the grand election day and its implications, we're joined by Elizabeth Freund Larus, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So first of all, Professor, what is at stake when it comes to parliamentary elections in the US?
Well, like the presidential one, they're going to be close. The Democrats are trying to gain control of the House as the Republicans are trying to hold on. The key chamber to watch is the Senate. Right now, the Democrats have a bare majority there by virtue of Vice President being Democrat, so she casts the deciding vote in tie votes. We're looking very keenly at the Senate races in Montana. West Virginia is certainly going to go Republican. So, we're probably just going to end up with split government again, regardless of who wins the White House. Whoever wins the White House is probably going to have to deal with the opposite party having a majority in either of the chambers.
And what would that mean? Because, in the last few years, we've seen that both chambers can effectively, at least hold some initiatives, some presidential initiatives. So what would it mean for either of the candidates?
Well, it makes it harder to pursue one's agenda because one or more of the chambers are likely to block a lot of initiatives. But this is how the founders of our country and the framers of the U.S. Constitution designed it. They purposely designed the U.S. federal government to be slow in its deliberations and slow in its passage of legislation. And that makes the U.S. different from the parliamentary systems where the leader of parliament comes from the majority party, and they can very often railroad legislation through. That rarely happens in the United States unless there's a sweep of both executive and legislative branch. So it's very frustrating to a lot of Americans and foreigners. People receive that, oh my gosh, nothing gets done. People are frustrated. It's deliberate, but it can be frustrating at times.
But nevertheless, it is balanced system of democracy in the U.S. Now, also mentioned that abortion and marijuana also on the agenda today. Now, are these issues hot topics of this year's campaign?
Very hot topics. As you probably know, a lot of suburban women, particularly white suburban women, still favor abortion, the ability of a woman to have an abortion. And a lot of them are, voting for Harris, regardless if they're Republican or Democrat. Of course, in the United States, there's also a very strong pro-life group that is, essentially voting the other way. But it is a hot topic. It should not be such a hot topic in the presidential race, because since the Dobbs decision, it's not up to the federal government, it's up to the states. So that is where if someone is either pro-abortion or pro-life, they really need to be paying attention to the candidates at the state level. And of course, the other issues are illegal immigration and the economy. I would say, the research that I'm doing, and I'm down here in North Carolina observing, campaigning elections here, that it's the economy. James Carville had that right. It's the economy, stupid. And so I think that's even a greater issue. Marijuana, that's a marginal issue. In Florida, it's on the ballot. In a lot of states, it's on the ballot. But it's not as important to voters as is economy, illegal immigration, crime, inflation, and abortion.
And what about Ukraine and NATO's future in Europe? Does it also polarize the American society?
Yes, it has. You don't hear as much on the campaign trail. However, Americans are very much divided in their support for Ukraine, and so they're going to obviously vote for the candidate that most reflects them. But I have heard some other analysts say foreign policy is a very, very important issue in this election. Yeah, maybe amongst like the urban elites, and that's just a very candid, answer. But you get outside suburbia, get into more rural areas. A lot of the U.S. is not located in the cities. A lot of the population is outside of the cities. And they're not focused on foreign policy quite as much. And if they are, they're not as supportive as funding for Ukraine as perhaps the urban elites are.
Mm-hmm. Now, talking about Ukraine, Ukraine and the EU as well. Well, many commentators across Europe have voiced their concerns with the potential victory of Donald Trump. Now, do you share these sentiments?
I do not. Former President Trump, he went to Europe when he was president, and he said very bluntly, you need to help pay more for your own security. Previous presidents had done that. Obama and Bush had done that, and Europe, nodded its collective heads and said, great, we'll do that. Let's go have cocktails now. And it's all very nice. Trump came over and he, really rattled, a lot of people. But we did see after that, a lot of people in Europe questioning U.S. resolve, which then forced them to pay more for the military. I mean, Trump saw, Russia being antagonistic toward Europe and said, you got to pay more. You got to pay the bill. And I know that didn't go down well in Europe, but he's very much saying and also over in Asia, do not think the United States is going to send its blood and treasure over if you are not prepared by yourselves.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned Asia because, well, you obviously specialize in the US-Pacific relations. So who are the Asian countries keeping their fingers crossed for?
Oh, wow. Yeah, hard. Okay, so China probably wants Harris because Harris will continue the Obama, Biden, Jake Sullivan approach of engagement. Trump, although he publicly says, hey, he's a pretty brilliant man because he controls 1.4 billion. He's much more jaded toward China. I mean, look at the trade war that he initiated, and on the campaign trail, he says, I'm going to raise tariffs on goods coming in from China. So I would think China would prefer Harris because I think they would see that she would be like a softer touch. And Philippines wants Trump. Taiwan is a bit mixed. It's harder to say. They're nervous about U.S. resolve. They're nervous about Trump. But out of the two, between Trump and Harris, Trump is the one who's more likely to say we need to put more investment. We need to build up the U.S. military, particularly its Navy, in the Asia Pacific. If Harris is talking about engagement, China's going to come back and say, why are you increasing military spending in the Asia Pacific if you're all about engagement? We don't trust you on your engagement, and they might use that as a tactic.
Mm-hmm. Do you expect China to ramp up its military and financial and first of all military support for Russia in case of Donald Trump's victory?
Well, they'll continue to support Russia. It serves China very well. It serves the Chinese economy very well. It serves them geopolitically very well. And so I don't think that the relationship is unlimited partnership, however she phrases it. But I think that relationship right now is serving. China's making a lot of money off of Russia. So they're not going to drop their support of Russia.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would Trump's victory mean for the future of U.S.-China relations? But I'm talking, in a really long perspective.
Very good question, because, Trump is limited to only one term if he were to win. So his vice presidential running mate is Senator J.D. Vance. Then it raises the question of, does a Trump victory set up a good, does it put J.D. Vance in a good position to run in the next election in 2028, and who would be his running mate, and who would the Democrats put up? So when you're talking long term, you need to look beyond 4 years. And in America, any country, you have an election, people start right away they turn around, they start campaigning for the next election. So it remains to be seen if J.D. Vance even wants to be, president and run in 2028. And so we need to look at who possibly is going to run. And then if Trump or Harris, are elected, what are their policies? So I think it's kind of hard to say what, U.S.-China relations are going to be like. I think we can say with certainty that the trade war will continue. And however, the United States will continue to at least talk with China and have military exchanges, because those are vitally important. I think any president is going to continue to pursue talks both at the diplomatic and at the military level.
Right now, Russia's meddling in U.S. elections is quite visible. Lately, they produced some fake stories and posted them online. I'm wondering about Chinese propaganda. Is it also visible in the American social media and the internet?
Well, it's certainly on TikTok. If you follow, anything on TikTok, you will see a lot of the shorts on TikTok are about the divisions in American society. And China very much wants to divide American society because it feels that an American society would be weaker. I have actually heard some analysts say that Xi Jinping and the CCP prefers Trump to win because if he wins, America will remain divided, and a divided America is weaker. So looking at TikTok, you can see evidence of that. Chinese influence operations are subtle. However, they have been very effective in placing people in key positions. Someone, a Chinese operative essentially was in the governor's staff up in New York. And that's one example. The driver for former Senator Dianne Feinstein, right, had very close connections with Beijing. And so Chinese influence operations are good, and I suspect that they will get better.
Well, lastly, as we were talking about this great polarization in the U.S., divisions. Now, we've heard reports that some shopkeepers across the U.S. are closing their businesses for at least a few days, anticipating a wave of discontent from one or the other side of the political barricade. Now, will there be violence in the U.S. streets in the next few days?
I am not anticipating it. Republicans, when they lose in the past, have tended to just kind of taken their ball and gone home. January 6th was definitely an aberration. I guess, there was this chaos in the Capitol, but not so much on the streets. Democrats and Democrat supporters tend to come out when there's abuses of civil liberties. So I don't anticipate it. I think those shopkeepers are just acting out of caution. I do not anticipate violence.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that in the very heart of the modern democracy. Elizabeth Freund Larus, Professor Elizabeth Freund Larus, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, was our guest today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. And of course, stay with us for much more here on TVP World.